The Roman Empire was relentless, but it encountered an insurmountable obstacle in the frozen lands of the north. At the moment Rome retreated, the legend of a painted people who seemed to have vanished from history was born. A people that even Rome could not conquer. It sounds like the plot of a legend, but it is historical fact. When we mention the Roman Empire, the image of relentless conquests and invincible legions comes to mind. However, there exists a mysterious people who challenged all of that unyielding expansion and still stood sovereign on their own lands. And as fascinating as that is, there is another intriguing detail. They simply disappeared without leaving a definitive explanation. Throughout history, various civilizations have risen and fallen, but few have been able to stand against the vast Roman wars. Even so, the Picts, inhabitants of the northern lands of Britannia, remained steadfast against the domination that transformed entire nations into Roman colonies. All of this carries a powerful lesson about the strength of a cultural identity, that despite not enduring through the centuries in the form of an independent state, echoes in accounts, enigmatic monuments, and the very formation of a territory we now call Scotland. You may already be wondering how a painted and seemingly isolated people managed to repel the Roman giant. The truth is that behind this resistance lie secrets of tribal organization, relentless geography, and a history of perseverance that intertwines with the mystery of their disappearance. Here, we will dive into each chapter of the Picts' journey, from their unknown origins to the artistic legacy they left, to understand why they earned a unique place in historical memory, and, above all, how the enigma surrounding their vanishing still intrigues us. The emergence of the Picts is surrounded by theories and gaps that make their history even more intriguing. The name Picts is derived from the Latin pictus, meaning painted or illustrated, referring to the tattoos or body paintings they displayed. It is believed that this custom was not merely aesthetic, but also a symbol of identity, and possibly a type of tribal code that reinforced internal bonds and commanded respect in the eyes of outsiders. Today's Scotland, known for its harsh climate and rugged terrain, was the perfect stage for the flourishing of a group that cultivated tradition, mysticism, and cultural cohesion. This people predominantly inhabited the region that the Romans called Caledonia, to the north of Britannia. The land was comprised of mountains, dense forests, and rugged coastlines, hindering the access of invaders and creating a sort of natural shield for these tribes. There, their communities lived off hunting, limited agriculture, and animal husbandry, making the most of every resource that the hostile land offered. The isolated geography, in a way, preserved many local customs, and this cultural autonomy was one of the reasons for the Pictish unity in the face of external threats. Scholars indicate that the Picts were a confederation of Celtic tribes, sharing similar linguistic features and spiritual rites. It is known that their languages were part of the Celtic branch, although there are few written records to confirm it. Some archaeological discoveries show curious inscriptions and symbols, but nothing compares to the documentary richness of other contemporary societies. This mystery, however, only reinforces the fascination. Who were they exactly, given their many connections to other Celtic peoples? There are accounts suggesting that the use of natural dyes for painting was not limited to conflicts, but extended to ceremonial rites, such as harvest celebrations and passage rituals. This strong connection to the land and the cycles of nature likely helped shape an identity deeply tied to the supernatural and the forces of the environment. Many later local legends mention mythical creatures and gods associated with water and forests, indicating that these elements may have been central to Pictish spirituality. The scarcity of written history concerning the Picts does not diminish the significance of their contribution to the formation of the peoples of the British Isles. Ancient Roman chroniclers described them as fierce, resistant to the cold, and unpredictable in battle. Many even associated their bravery with the very mountainous nature they inhabited, considering them part of an other world. And in a way, they truly lived in a different reality, with values and rituals that radically distinguished them from any Roman standard. A curious point is that different Pictish tribes could ally with other Celtic groups, though they always maintained their strong tribal identity. When there was no external threat, these clans possibly disputed territories and resources among themselves, but the need for common defense against external invaders unified them. This ability to quickly unite, even with internal differences, would later become a crucial factor in their resistance to large invading campaigns, such as those organized by the Roman Empire. The transition between the Painted People and the pre-existing Celtic tribes remains an enigma for many researchers. Some suggest they descended directly from native populations, predating the arrival of Celtic waves. Others argue they were merely a branch of Celts that developed particular cultural traits. Regardless, what matters is that the Picts left deep marks on the northern territory of Britannia, creating foundations that would help shape the formation of medieval kingdoms in the long run. But this story takes even bolder contours when we analyze how they managed to remain free from Roman domination. The Picts became known for their incredible ability to resist the greatest empire of antiquity. Rome, famous for its disciplined legions and art of conquest, found in Caledonia a challenge that deviated from the patterns that had dominated the rest of Britannia. Many believed that Roman engineering, capable of building roads and fortresses anywhere, would be enough to bend the will of these clans. However, reality showed another face. The rugged terrain and the great distance from the Roman comfort zone turned each advance into a logistical nightmare for the legions. This geographical difficulty, combined with the ferocity and cultural resilience of the Picts, led to constant partial defeats or stalemates that placed Rome's expansion in jeopardy. It was in an attempt to contain these indomitable peoples that Emperor Hadrian decided to erect the famous Hadrian's Wall in AD 122. The purpose was clear: to demarcate the official border of the empire and defend the southern provinces from possible attacks. Many say that this wall symbolized both the strength of Rome and the recognition of its limits, as there began the territory that even they could not secure. The Pictish defense strategy involved ambushes and strategic retreats among the hills and forests. While the legions tried to maintain impeccable formations, the Picts took advantage of irregular terrain, the damp climate, and the absence of roads to surprise their enemies. In many Roman accounts, they are portrayed as fearless warriors, painted from head to toe, attacking suddenly and disappearing into the landscape. This almost mythical image became a nightmare for generals expecting predictable pitched battles. It is worth noting that their resistance was not limited to direct confrontations. On the contrary, the Picts also prevented the consolidation of Roman administration in the north. By not establishing Roman villas, lasting roads, or centers of power, the empire was unable to effectively integrate those lands. Economically, few trade routes solidified toward the north, which reduced Roman interest in the region, even though they did not give up on the idea of conquering it to expand their influence. Emperor Septimius Severus, in the early 3rd century, led a particularly aggressive campaign to subjugate the region. Even bringing a massive and well-trained contingent, it is estimated that Rome lost about 50,000 soldiers in skirmishes against local clans and the harsh climate. This staggering statistic highlights the difficulty of fighting Roman wars in territory foreign to the empire's military engineering. With so many losses, Rome was forced to retreat and reinforce its defenses at Hadrian's Wall, leaving the Picts virtually untouched. It is intriguing how, even after several attempts, Caledonia remained without the definitive Roman mark seen in other parts of Europe. While benefiting from this sovereignty, the Picts remained in a constant state of readiness for battle, knowing that the enemy was persistent. This life of constant alert deeply influenced their values and culture, making warfare not only a survival necessity, but also a vital component of their collective identity. The result of all this was that northern Britannia ended up configured as a frontier zone, a kind of end of the world in the eyes of the Romans, but for the Picts, it was the heart of their freedom. And this freedom was secured by generations, even as the Roman Empire withdrew from Britannia in the 5th century. However, the Romans' departure did not mean eternal peace for the Picts. New dangers and challenges would arise as the political landscape of the British Isles underwent radical transformations. With the official withdrawal of the Roman legions from Britannia in the early 5th century, a power vacuum opened up on the island. For the Picts, this moment represented a continuation of their defense practices, but also the possibility of expanding their influence without the immediate shadow of a great empire. Still, the late Roman chronicles and some medieval records attest that even after this period, the Picts were seen as a constant threat to peoples further south, especially when they allied with other groups. A notable example of this Pictish persistence was the series of raids in 368 AD, when they allied with other forces labeled barbarian to breach already weakened Roman defenses. Sources like Ammianus Marcellinus dramatically describe these attacks, emphasizing the ferocity and organization of the incursions. Even though the Romans relied on fortifications, the union of the Picts with different groups made the southern borders insecure, leading to internal tensions and the fall of local rulers. After the complete withdrawal of the empire, Britannia entered a phase of political fragmentation. Various small kingdoms and local chieftains emerged, some ruled by remaining Roman leaders, others by Celtic and Germanic tribes that settled in the region. The Picts found their place in this chaos, maintaining much of the territory they already occupied and expanding alliances with other peoples, such as the Scots or Gaels coming from Ireland. At certain moments, smaller conflicts and political arrangements shaped an intricate power struggle in the northern part of the island. Interestingly, even with the Romans' departure, there is no evidence that the Picts immediately adopted many of the administrative or military structures left by the empire. Although there are traces of influence in clothing and possibly in construction techniques, they maintained their own political organization traditions based on tribal chieftains and warrior councils. It was common for a king to temporarily unite several tribes around common goals, such as defending borders or attacking a stronger enemy. In terms of material culture, this post-Roman period seems to have been marked by the continuity of their enigmatic art. Pictish stones filled with geometric symbols and stylized animals continued to be produced and improved. It is believed that such monuments could have had some religious or territorial significance, but they also served to narrate important events such as battles or alliances. The absence of readable writing makes precise interpretation difficult, but it does not erase the cultural richness of this people. At the same time, the gradual insertion of Christianity also left its marks. Missionaries from regions to the south, or from Ireland, ventured into the northern lands, leading to a slow yet steady integration of new religious values. However, this does not mean that Pictish culture diluted all at once. They underwent a process of syncretism, where Christian elements coexisted with ancient tribal traditions, giving rise to hybrid religious practices. This transitional period would pave the way for deeper political and religious transformations. The seeds of future conflicts and the evolution of the region's politics were being sown during this same period. While kingdoms rose and fell, the Picts demonstrated a remarkable capacity for adaptation and resistance. Even the departure of Rome did not bring them total respite, as the Germanic peoples arriving in Britannia, such as the Angles and Saxons, would soon become new adversaries. And against these new challenges, the idea of Pictish unity further reinforced the internal cohesion of those tribes. During the early Middle Ages, the Picts continued to reaffirm their position in the political landscape of northern Britannia. This period was marked by the formation of Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to the south, such as Northumbria, and by increasing contacts with the Christian world, which was already spreading across much of Europe. Even having at certain moments become tributaries of Northumbria, the Picts maintained some autonomy, ready to contest the influence of any power that tried to subjugate their lands. An important milestone was the Battle of Dun Nechtain in 685, when the Picts inflicted a crushing defeat on the Angles. This triumph spectacularly reversed the situation of submission, showing that Pictish military strength was still notable. Many historians interpret this victory as a turning point in the political consolidation of the Picts, as from then on, they strengthened internal alliances and extended their influence to neighboring areas, reactivating old strategies of tribal union. Under the reign of Wengus Mom, 729-761, the Picts reached the height of their power in the region. Oengus expanded his holdings into the Gaelic kingdom of Dalriata, also known as Dawana, establishing a dominion that transcended traditional tribal boundaries. This movement was crucial for forming a more solid political structure, where familial ties, diplomatic marriages, and military alliances painted a more complex map than the ancient Roman frontiers could have imagined. The coexistence between Picts and Gaels brought valuable cultural exchanges. On one side, the Picts absorbed some traits of Irish Christianity, deepening religious influence in their communities. On the other hand, the Gaels learned warfare tactics adapted to the mountainous terrain and shared social organization methods that would influence all of Scotland. At this time, mixed fortresses existed where Pictish culture blended with Gaelic elements, generating hybrid identities. Despite this progress, tensions with other kingdoms and surrounding peoples did not cease. Saxon expansion movements and internal conflicts could arise at any moment, testing the coherence of the Pictish kingdom. In some accounts, it is noted that the charisma and authority of the kings were determining factors in maintaining unity. Without strong leaders, the tribes reverted to internal disputes, undermining collective strength. This delicate balance was repeated in various parts of medieval Europe, but in the northern territories, where natural conditions were harsh, any instability could be fatal. Interestingly, artistic and cultural production remained active during this period, although there are fewer records than we would like. Christian missionaries and scribes began producing manuscripts that, although not strictly Pictish, contained symbolic references that may have been influenced by them. There are signs of significant interaction between monasteries in Pictish territories and Irish monastic schools. This suggests an intellectual exchange, albeit fragmented, that kept the flame of written culture alive in the region. Thus, we arrive at a scenario in which the Picts not only survived the Roman withdrawal and Saxon invasions, but also forged an influential kingdom with Gaelic ties. They seemed ready to shape, alongside other Celtic peoples, the identity that would come to characterize northern Britannia. However, even more devastating forces from the sea would soon begin to completely alter the geopolitics of these islands. And it is precisely this chapter that will delve into the fascinating story of the decline and disappearance of the Picts as an independent political entity. By the late 8th century, Viking incursions had a profound and immediate impact across Europe, and the lands of the Picts were no exception. The Vikings, known for their brutality and maritime efficiency, sailed along the coasts of Scotland, attacking monasteries, plundering villages, and imposing a constant rhythm of terror. Even the well-trained armies of the Picts found it difficult to defend against an enemy accustomed to swift and lethal raids. One of the most significant battles occurred in 839, when a clash against the Vikings resulted in the death of the king of Dalriata and several Pictish leaders. This blow decimated the ruling elite and left the territory without clear leadership, triggering a process of internal disintegration. Without a strong command corps, the tribes became vulnerable to successive invasions and power struggles that eroded the cohesion built over generations. In this context, the figure of Kenneth MacAlpin, Syniad Mac Ailpin, emerged, unifying the Pictish and Gaelic kingdoms and laying the foundations for what would become the Kingdom of Scotland. Although chronicles often recount this process in a nearly legendary manner, it seems certain that Kenneth MacAlpin took advantage of the chaos left by the Viking invasion to centralize power and consolidate a mixed dominion, combining Pictish and Gaelic traditions. Thus began a new political formation that would progressively become known as Scotland. What we observe from then is a sort of erasure of the name Picts from historical records. It does not mean that the local population physically disappeared, but rather that the distinct political and cultural identity dissolved into the new power structure. Gaelic culture came to predominate, although Pictish traits continued to exist in legends, monuments, and possibly regional customs. This process was gradual but effective, resulting in the loss of the term Picts as a reference to a specific people. The transition was not without internal conflicts, as resentments among clans feeling wronged existed. However, the need to defend against an external enemy, in this case the Vikings still active in the region, and the advantages of a unified kingdom outweighed local rivalries. Gradually, the concept of Scotland took shape, and the official narrative-favoured rulers descended from Kenneth MacAlpin, reinforcing the idea of a singular and cohesive dynasty. Over time, the new monarchy consolidated alliances with neighbouring peoples, reinforced fortifications, and established new power structures that replaced many of the old tribal traditions. The memory of the Picts, however, persisted through popular tales, oral traditions, and especially the Pictish stones that remained firmly planted in various locations in the north. For many Scots, the Pictish heritage is a source of pride, although it serves more as a symbol of ancestry than a living cultural foundation. It is fascinating to note how a people so resilient to the Roman Empire eventually integrated into another political formation that became in itself a lasting kingdom. This historical irony shows that sometimes the strength of a civilization can succumb not only to external invasions, but also to internal fusions that create something new. Thus, the chapter of a people that, for centuries, posed a true enigma for the greatest empires of their time comes to a close. However, it is not the end of everything, as their material and spiritual legacy remains alive, as we will see when analyzing their artistic manifestations. Pictish art is one of the greatest mysteries that this people left for posterity. The famous Pictish stones, scattered throughout northern Scotland, display geometric symbols, representations of animals, and stylized human figures, often without a definitive interpretation. Researchers speculate that they could serve as territorial demarcations, commemorate great battles, or recount mythical episodes. However, none of these hypotheses has been conclusively proven, leaving a universe of possibilities open. Unlike other cultures, the Picts did not leave written texts to explain the meaning of these symbols. Therefore, each new archaeological discovery can provide unprecedented clues about their social organization or religious beliefs. Some stones exhibit elements of possible religious significance, such as crosses carved after the arrival of Christianity, side by side with icons that seem to be of pagan origin. This blend indicates a transitional period where old and new traditions coexisted, revealing the cultural complexity of the people. The artistic quality of these sculptures stands out for its precision and harmonious forms, even when depicting seemingly simple scenes. Many images of animals, for example, show fluid contours that demonstrate a certain aesthetic refinement. These details suggest that there were artisans or masters skilled in stonework, passing down skills from generation to generation. It is worth remembering that in this historical period, it was no trivial matter to have suitable tools to carve rocks with such precision. Another striking legacy is the remnants of personal ornaments, such as brooches and buckles, found in excavations. In many cases, they are elaborately crafted pieces, influenced by Celtic styles and later Christian elements. Everything indicates that Pictish society valued both personal appearance and public artistic expressions, such as monuments and altars. And although the harsh northern climate has erased many traces, what remains still impresses with its inventiveness and aesthetic care. In addition to sculpture, there are reports that the Picts developed textiles and metal utensils with ornamental motifs, although this aspect is less well known compared to the Pictish stones. Some ceremonial blades and rudimentary jewelry have been associated with them, reinforcing the idea that they had a diverse material culture. The stylized patterns and repetitive symbols could carry tribal meanings, representing the lineage of each clan or evoking the protection of local deities. This set of artistic manifestations reveals to us that the Picts were not simply fierce warriors isolated in mountainous territories. On the contrary, they had a worldview where spirituality, aesthetic expression, and communal life walked hand in hand. These artistic creations are what comes closest to a historical record left by them, allowing us to understand a little of their sensibility and how they related to the sacred and the everyday. If we analyze the role of these arts today, we see that they function as bridges to a past full of gaps yet extremely rich in open questions. By studying each symbol or sculpture, we understand a little more about a people who, even without integrating into the Roman Empire, developed a remarkable culture. This legacy left deep marks in Scotland and continues to spark the curiosity of travelers, archaeologists, and history enthusiasts worldwide. The story of the Picts reveals how a people can challenge a powerful empire, persist in the face of new invaders, and still have their name dissolved in the formation of a later kingdom. It is a saga of courage, strategy, and mystery, showing how the will to maintain a cultural identity can withstand time, even as the society itself transforms and merges into another reality. This historical enigma leads us to reflect on the strength of a nation that relied on rituals, symbols, and seemingly inhospitable territories, yet proved invincible to Roman power. At what point did tribal unity and painted culture become the foundation that not even the most disciplined legions could break? And how did those same factors, which once ensured resistance, culminate in a political fusion that erased the name Picts from official accounts? Now that you know this incredible journey, we invite you to ponder how the cultures of the past still echo in our present. What lessons can we draw from a people who turned geographical challenges and external pressures into strength and legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments and help keep the memory of the Picts alive. For stories like this deserve to be told and retold, inspiring generations to look to the past with new eyes.